feel uptight. I feel all this intense pressure squeezing in on me. I feel like I'm trapped and don't know where to go. I have no direction. What exactly is God's will for me? Why can't I find it? Why is this so hard? Why is God's will like this magical dangling carrot that I can never seem to catch? We often make it harder than it is. Maybe it's because we confuse God's will with my will. We get impatient. We try to pigeonhole the omnipotent creator of the universe to fix us, heal us, help us, and bless us by begging him, or raising our voice to him, or bargaining with him, everything but saying, "Your will be done, not mine." See, we've confused our role in this epic story that's unfolding in front of us. It's not about me, it's about him. I'm not the star of this movie, he is. I've just got a small cameo in this beautiful love story about truth and redemption. That takes the burden off of me. I can focus on making Jesus famous and living a life that points the spotlight to him. I feel better now. I can breathe again.
I have realized that in both loving and giving, I am cautious. I only let go of what is required of me. I only love a little bit at a time, and sometimes not even that much. There is a story in the very beginning of the Bible about us being made in the image of God. We were created by God to look just like him. And more than just looking like him, we were made to be like him, to have his qualities, to have a heart like his, each and every heart handmade by the creator of the universe. We were literally made with love, made by love, to love. So this question, where is the love? I mean, if we were actually made by love with the purpose to love, why is it that we have such a hard time really loving? The way I show love is safe. To the people I know and I know love me. I don't jump at the chance to show love that won't be returned, or that I won't see appreciated. This is also how I give, only to people who I can see with my own eyes are needy. But it's always only my leftovers, only what I already know I'm not going to use or don't need. I've never joyfully given one of my favorite things away. What if I did? What if I gave away something so valuable? What if I let my heart be stolen? What if I gave my love away freely? What if I realized it wasn't mine to keep anyway? Where is my love?
And every fracture caused by the lack of it. You were a million years of work. Say God and his angels with needle and thread. They kiss your head and said, you're a good kid, and you make us proud. So just give your best and the rest will come and we'll see you soon. And all the blood and all the sweat that we invested to be loved follows us into our room. We begin to understand. Maybe Hollywood was right when the credits have rolled and our tears have dried, and the answers that we have been dying to find all pieced together, and somehow we are made of love, and all the beauty stemming from. We are made of love, and every fracture caused by the lack of love, caused by the lack of love.
Because I was such a poet, because I grew up with being in touch with my emotions as a physical being that has a soul, and I was in touch with my emotional side, meaning that I can be a man and cry, or I can be a man and have emotions, that I can be sensitive and sensitized to the things around me without having to be obstinate or impertinent to those emotions that are around me, that I kind of thought that I knew what love was. I always imagined and wrote about the types of love that I experienced when I was younger, growing up, and as I went through life, how I reacted to this topic of love. There was much that even after I got saved, I didn't understand about love, and I read all the books that you could possibly find on the topic of love. You know, 1 Corinthians, love is patient, love is kind, love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. And I never was satisfied because I could always find the exception to what love is. I knew that there was more to the subject than what met the eye. I understood that there was more of a reality of it being from God's perspective, that we should be learning what love is as opposed to our objective of receiving love. Because I could see how people can love babies, you know, when I looked at them and I thought they were like the ugliest thing that ever walked the face of the earth. Whenever a baby was born, I kept thinking, wet rat. You know, I mean, it's kind of, if you ever seen a wet rat, you know, that's kind of swimming for its life, and you yank it out by its tail, you know, and it's like, you know, all wet and kind of ugly looking. Well, that's what I kind of picture baby, shriveled up and all And I used to tell people, look, I appreciate, the beauty of a mother and its baby, but is it okay if I come a week later, when it's got some features? Because, no offense, but I can't see anything except sniveled, kind of little brat that came out from where it was at, kind of like all waterlogged. And that's the way I picture babies being born. So some people will say, well, that's not very nice. That's why you don't invite me to your birth. You don't want me around when you're giving birth. The mother looks like hell, and guess what? The baby looks like it just came from there. Ugh, blech. You gotta clean up that act. Come on now. There's nothing gorgeous about this little shriveled up kind of thingy that's growing, and becoming a human being. Frankly, I wonder what it is when it's first born. And now every mother in the world's gonna hate me. But you gotta have a special kind of love to love something like that. So I didn't know what love is, and I imagine that, people are going to take this with a grain of salt. I hope, and appreciate the fact that not everybody sees newborns as beautiful. God knows. It's got potential. But, later, yeah, I get it with babies. Once there's some comprehension there, a little bit of kind of like goo-goo gaga stuff, it's like, okay, I got you. And I can go there, So I've always had kind of an emotional side, and I've had, the pragmatic side. Later in life, as I grew older, as a Christian, I actually had to learn the male side, and I didn't like that part. I didn't like the male ego that I didn't have a father, so I didn't grow up with. I didn't have this kind of hardness of heart that I really see most men, and I mean most, as being, and that they have to unlearn in their 20s in order to develop some maturity in their 30s, and hopefully by the time they're 40, they've got some, head on their shoulders and some brains in their, noggin, that they've begun to comprehend the full spectrum of what the human experience is all about. And that's kind of what I want to do is in discussing love, especially as a fruit of the Spirit, as being a part of who God is and what God is, and being the nature of our Father in heaven. Because you see, if you don't know what love is, then you really don't know what God has done. Because until you understand what God has done, you'll always doubt whether you can have salvation, and you'll doubt whether you are saved. But once you figure that one out, then you'll realize that the reason you are saved, or because you've been given salvation, is because, to put it bluntly, God loves you. And the fact of the matter of your discovery or uncovering of what that love is the nature of what you'll be doing throughout eternity, is always constantly experiencing in some new revelatory way the nature of God being worked out through your interactions with your Creator, your Father, who is in heaven. Now, God has so designed our life to be such that we would become into contact with Him in some way. Your reality of what you're living today is the nature of what God has ordained in this world of the physical realm to discover, to begin to realize, and to begin to come into contact with a supreme being, a entity that's greater than you are, and to begin to develop something that you don't know you need in order to get into heaven, and that is love. You see, the nature of what you were was not love. You were, to put it bluntly, in the physical world, in this area that we live in, what you can see, what you can touch, what you can feel, what you can breathe in and handle, and what you comprehend that you can't see but you still understand, sort of, the wind, things like that, emotions. To put it bluntly, you were born in sin. I mean, you were born corrupt. You were born messed up. You were born in a way that is not perfect. Now, I know mothers look at their little babies and they think they're perfect, but no offense, they're not. As soon as they start crying, you realize that, and just give them one good swat and see how well they accept that one. There ain't no way some baby's gonna say, oh, thank you for that. I rejoice in that, and I'm glad, I'm gonna count it all joy because I got swatted on my behind. No! But the reality of love that God is talking about is that He wants to change you from what you were born into to what he was created you to become. And that is a being of love, or have a consistency and a constancy of loving. In other words, he wants you to be like him in the way that he has loved the world. Now, you don't really see that love because you say, well, that's not the way I see it. Well, that's the way that an ant says to a person stepping on it. It's like, well, I don't see it coming. Boom, and it's squished. Yeah, you really don't understand it because you don't comprehend it yet. But as you grow and develop in what we call the graces of God, you learn to appreciate who God is, what God is, and then suddenly you begin to understand something of the Spirit of God and what we call love. Until you do, you really have no idea what love is. You only know what love does. And I can say that to you that this is where most people's problem lies. You know what love does for you when you feel like, quote, you are in love. Love does make you feel high, excited, wired. You release endorphins, or whatever you want to say about the physical, things inside your body. You have a better comprehension in some ways. In some ways you have less, depending upon if it's your first love or last love. But the point being is this. Your comprehension and your definition of love at this stage, if it's only in the physical realm, is limited. It's designated by what it does for you, by its input to you. Because if you don't feel love, then you don't think love exists. If you don't feel loved by someone, then you don't think that that person loves you. Now, I can say, I love my wife to you, and if I never told her, would she know that she is loved by me? Not unless she watches this VidDevo, because unless there is some kind of response to love in the physical realm that we live in this life that we're calling love as what we call it everyday kind of love in the earth and the world and the humanity that we use. If we didn't do something to remonstrate, demonstrate, exemplify, personify, or cross over the barriers of one human being to another, that other human being would not know if they are loved or if they just imagine that love exists. Now, I could still have that feeling inside. I could still be in love with my wife. I could still love my wife. I could still love her and care for her in passionate ways beyond the comprehension of humanity to ever know. But unless I do something about that, it doesn't mean anything to the other person. The other person doesn't feel love, so they don't know if love exists. That's kind of what it's like with God sitting on being who he is and you being where you're at. Because you see, you think you know what love is, but unless love is given to you, unless love is done to you, unless love is in some way crossed over to you, you have no idea if someone else loves you or what love is. But once someone begins to emote on you, to make into action the designation of this word we're using called love, of a spiritual reality that we use in the physical realm to describe those things that are selfishly felt, then you would never know if you feel love or if you have love until you are loved. Do you get that? Do you get the fact that until someone loves you, you don't know what love is? And that's a fact. I mean, you have to be loved to love. You think you could just automatically generate it, but you don't. You only know love by having been loved by your parents or by your father or your mother or by someone that has in some way crossed the threshold of this emotion you never felt before until suddenly something caused you to connect and you had this emotional response to what you're feeling, and you called it love. Now, there's nothing wrong with it being purely selfish, because that's really what we're talking about. Self-love, the only kind of love you can experience in the physical plane, in the physical realm, the reality of what you have is purely selfish. It's all self-centered, self-directed, beneficial. It can only demonstrate itself by first receiving from that with which its source came from, someone else, and then it responds back with its own flavor, its own additive, its own way of personifying that, quote, emotion that that person has inspired or provoked or in some way instigated in another person. You see, you don't get it from just having it. You can't have love and then suddenly one day you woke up and said, hey, I'm going to love today. Wow, cool, I'm love. No, you had to be loved in order to love. And that's the point that we're making today. In order for you to really have an understanding of love, you have to have been loved. Because your understanding and your comprehension and your ability to love will all be determined, believe it or not, from whether you've been loved or never really been loved at all. As a matter of fact, psychologists, sociologists, and people that are in the know about the physical realm and just mental things without ever getting into the soulful or the spiritual side of love or the reality of what love really is, have all defined this as being you are a byproduct or you are influenced by the environment with which you grew in. So the fact that you don't know love may have been caused by your mother or your father, and so they always ask you those kind of leading questions. Did you love your mother? Well, no. If you're 16, you got to take it with a grain of salt. I mean, come on now. They may say no, but they mean yes sometimes. But the point is this. The understanding and the comprehension isn't limited to only that initiated spark or that initiated beginning of someone loving you, but rather you add to it and subtract from it based upon your experiences of it. In other words, you love more sometimes even though you were loved less, because you add the increase of who you are inside and your responses throughout life to it. So it's not based solely or only upon someone who has loved you and given you love, but they have started the initial process of development in that area of your life. Because what God tries to do in our life is to develop us as complete, as wholesome. And the word holy really means to be complete. It means to be responsive and completed in your physical realm of who you are, the emotional realm, the soulful part of you, and the spiritual aspect of who you are. Because you really can't do those two yourself. You can't really change a lot of your emotions. You can develop them in some disciplinary way, but you can't really influence them to the direct way that God can. Nor can you even begin to influence your spirit if you're not spiritually born. God does that. And only God can change that, and only God can mature that. So there's a lot of your definition that may be lacking in what love is, because you really don't know. But as you begin to develop, you begin to comprehend that there is a certain amount of truth of your love is started by someone else. It wasn't initiated by you in the beginning. Now, once you've added your own flavor and example and experiences, then of course you initiate some kind of triggered response to certain stimuli that you see, feel, touch, or experience in life, but that still is a response to, not a direct initiation of, I think I'll wake up one day and I'll love. You can't do it. It doesn't work that way. It's responsive. And that's what the physical part of your body is all about. It is responsive. So love, if you're only dealing with it on the physical realm, if you're only dealing with it as what you feel and what you try to demonstrate to other people, is only responsive. Love is responsive, but its capabilities are limited. Its functionality is pragmatic. It can't cross over into areas where it cannot go because it's limited in a certain parameters within the physical realm of causing responsiveness by being a response in the beginning. So it's always going to be that type of love that we call responsive. It's not love is responsive, but it's a responsive love. The love that you want to have would be not only responsive, but go beyond that to be initiative. In other words, there should be more to love than just response. There should be the capabilities and the availability of knowing more through love than what we experience simply by being responsive to someone loving us and having that as our only foundation for understanding and appreciating this topic we're talking about and what we actually experience in our soul and our spirit, which is love. Now, I want you to experience more. I mean, don't get me wrong, we could talk forever about responsive love, and I'm very good at it. You know, it's like, yeah, I understand responsive love. I could make you fall in love with a pencil. I mean, I could so I could write in such a way to inspire you with how wonderful the grain and the filament of that shavings are such that the dynamic of the parameters with which it's formed, you know, and the fascination with which the lead has been, you know, ingrained within that wood itself, you know, I mean, just, I could go on and on and on. And you can make similes and metaphors, and people that are great writers are able to make you fall in love with anything. I mean, they can inspire you into whatever it is they choose to inspire the audience they're writing for. And if they know who they're writing for, they can do that. If they don't know who they're writing for, they use generics, you know. So hopefully to get a mass production of people that will respond to them in a way that they've used technique and skill. And then identification to create a response. So they create a like-mindedness, which is really a form or a nature of a lesser love than what love is. So as we develop in this study of love, don't get caught up into just, you know, one aspect of love, like responsiveness. Remember and recognize always that we want you to understand that not only God is love, and that he loved the world, that he gave his only begotten Son, you know, that whosoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. That's a demonstration of his normalcy of who he is. That's an automatic, of course God would do that. That should be the reality of knowing that's the kind of love we want to be growing into. We want to have a kind that always feels love responsively, but also is responsible in the way that we use love and that we adapt to love, and we adapt to how we're learning what love is. Because, like I said, if you didn't know that the person you tell me that you're in love with is really just responsive love, because as long as that person loves you, you love them. But when they quit loving you, does love disappear? Did love go bye-bye? Where did the emotion go? If that person suddenly slapped you on the cheek, would you turn to the other and say, yeah, hit me on the other side because I love it? Well, if you're a masochist, I guess you would, but you know, if you're not a masochist and you have a normal reaction, you would quit loving that person at that moment and you'd say, I didn't like that. And I would dare say that would be a good response. But the point of what the emotion is, where did it go? What did it do? Where can we get it back? Can we lose it? Or is, in fact, what we thought we had not really love, but more responsive or response to this topic we're calling? Think about it. I think you're going to find there's more to love than meets the eye.
You might say, I don't believe in God, but the Bible says not possible. You see, everyone has a God, whether or not it's the God of the gospel. You might say, I don't believe in God, but there's always that one thing that's king. Even the dictionary defines God as what we make supreme. You see, it's a theme, it's a thread, it's in all human beings. We were made to worship, and it's not just about singing. Some may say, wait, I don't worship, I've put that on the shelf. But I say, technically, you worship God or you worship yourself. See, we all worship something. To an object, we're all liable. Ladies, to some, your boyfriend is your God and Cosmo is your Bible. And some guys may walk into church and say, in God I trust, but are secretly addicted to pornography and lust. Yet we mock and we laugh at the Israelites' golden calf. But we do the same thing right back. It just looks a little different than that. So question, what's on your throne? What do you chase so you don't feel alone? What defines you? What gives you worth? What, if lost, would make your heart hurt? You see, this is your God. We've sacrificed deep joy for shallow happiness. To be honest, we look like fools. Like adults splashing around in the kiddie pool saying, wow, this is so cool. Because we're slaves to our possessions, constantly craving something new. Reality check. If you can't give it up, you don't own it. It owns you. That's why worship is not just a behavior, it goes into our core. So ask yourself this, who is your God? Who do you bow down before? For example, some of you don't worship God, you worship what he said. You've got theology in your mind, but in your heart you're naked, pitiful, poor, and dead. But I want to transition. I want to make a spiritual incision. Can you really say that these things are the ultimate purpose of living? I mean, instead of worshiping the creator of you and I, we've all said, no thanks, God, we'll take your stuff, but you can die. But that trade is terrible, trading God for man. God offers water to our thirsty souls, and we say, but this is such good sand. And I know I'm not the only one who's felt the gnawing pain within. And I know I'm not the only one who's felt the weight of my own sin. But this is the truth. Where we exchanged ourselves for God, thinking we could be him, he exchanged himself for us, absorbing all our sin. I mean, God literally put on flesh. And do you see how we treated him? The ultimate war veteran. He died for our freedom. Nonetheless, he was thinking of you and me with every whip that beat him, knowing full well that one day we'd say, nah, I don't really need him. But like a father, he couldn't bear his children to not be free. So he hung on that tree. He paid that fee for specks of dirt like you and me. So my plea is let him restore his proper place. I promise you, he loves you right now. Just trust in his grace. One final thing. I'll leave you with this. What were those other things that took nails in their wrists? Or when was the last time sex or money forgave you? When was the last time a relationship freed you from what you were enslaved to? See, what else died so you could be made new? When was the last time the world promised satisfaction and actually came through? God offers freedom. The world offers chains, and you'll never beat the odds. You're gonna worship something. Jesus, God's son who took your sin, or some other counterfeit gods.